Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Pathfinder by Payload, the leading digital media company in the space industry. I'm your host, Mo Islam, and my guest today is Robert Sproles, CEO of Exolaunch. Exolaunch is a German-based company specializing in launch services, mission management, and deployment systems for small satellites. Robert and I chat about the company's origin story, the market for rideshare missions, and how the company grew to a $100 million business with no external capital. On to the show. Robert, thanks so much for being on the show. Great to have you.
Oh, thanks, Mo. Really excited to be here. Looking forward to this.
So before we get into Exolaunch, I want to hear the Robert story. So tell us a little bit about how you ended up in the space industry. Tell us a little bit about your educational background, your PhD in applied physics. So clearly you're smart. Just tell us a little bit about how you, your kind of sort of upbringing, background, and then how you ended up at Exolaunch.
Well, sure. I'll try to keep this short because, I don't want to spend too much time on me. So I grew up in rural Arkansas. A very small town kid. I'm out in the country, and wasn't really thinking much about the space industry. Space industry was something that other people did. Of course, I was interested in science and really kind of mechanics and how things around us work. Have a family history of mechanics and engineers, but it was more on the kind of the factory side of things, or maybe the chemical plant, but wasn't about space or opportunities that would present themselves on kind of this global scale. But of course, went high school and then went to college. Had great opportunities there, and in college got into physics. I started declaring an engineering major, but I fell in love with my physics professor, and he really influenced me strongly to say, hey, there are other options out here. So I fell in love with what he was doing and saying, and switched my major just to pure physics. Not because I thought there were going to be career opportunities there, but just because it was so interesting. So graduated with a BS in physics, and then ran a planetarium. And that was, kind of the first foray into space, as it were, on the astronomy side of things. And a guy that ended up being my major professor, he came to campus and he said, "Have you ever thought about grad school?" And I said, "No, not at all, because I need to, I need to pay the bills. I need a job. I don't need more school." And he said, "Well, come talk to us." And he actually, the next 2 days later, in my mailbox, I received some information from the school, and I thought, well, if he's on the ball enough that he's going to send me this information, I at least owe him to look into it. And what he had to offer was access to some NASA grant money and some research programs. So I went to the University of Arkansas Little Rock and got a PhD in applied physics, doing research that was in support of the space shuttle program. So we had a lab scale hybrid rocket motor there on campus, and it was designed to mimic the internal pressures and temperatures of the space shuttle main engines. So I thought, well, this is amazing. And that was the first time that I thought, oh, wow, like I can do space, or, people from rural Arkansas can be involved in this stuff. So I thought, well, this will be, my career. I'll kind of do this, and then maybe I'll go to NASA and I'll be this research guy and had this all planned out. Of course, I graduated about the time that the space shuttle program was ending, so that didn't work out. But one of the things that I'm very proud of, and one of the things that I say to students all the time is always be willing to say yes, and do not be afraid of curved career trajectories. Because if my career has said anything, it is that it has not been a straight line. So after grad school, the NASA thing didn't.
That very much resonates with me, Robert, because I was a banker for the first 2/3 of my career. And if you had asked me, hey, you're going to be a media operator, in a few years, I'd say no chance.
We have to be.
No way.
Yeah, we have to be open to these opportunities, because we never know where they're going to come from.
It's been one of my biggest life learnings, which is that you just don't know. And, you don't know a life that never sort of like pans out exactly how you think it's going to, and that's okay. And oftentimes you end up in a better place than you even thought. But it's just one of those moments where I'm like, I just never could have, I would have never in a million years have guessed. So I completely agree with that. By the way, on your point on the planetarium, I do just have to say one quick thing. I deeply appreciate that because growing up here in the city, I mean, New York is not a space town, but I grew up going to the Hayden Planetarium.
Oh my word.
And
That's a
I'm sure,
dream.
yeah, I'm sure you've been. I actually loved going to the planetarium to the point that I actually, when I was in middle school, I remember going to like going up to the front desk at the American Museum of Natural History, and I was like, "Hey, do you guys have any internship programs?" And they were
That's
like,
amazing.
they were like, "Yeah, like well, not really," I basically was like, "Hey, I'll come. I'll work for free. I'll come. I just want to like be a part of the planetarium." So actually, I did that for like 2 years when I was in school. They didn't like have a formal program, but I was like, I mean, I was just doing sort of like kind of random things, but I was like in the planetarium. It was just like a really, really great experience. So it's kind of funny. Your comment like brings me back to a very fond memory of my childhood. I've not been to the planetarium in a number of years, but great place, and I totally get the passion for it.
Yeah, well, they are great, front doors to
Absolutely.
the industry or to kind of the subject matter because they are, of interest to the general public. But a good planetarium, and there are so many wonderful ones, really brings that down to the public's interest level. And please don't hear me say I'm saying to the public's intellect level because the public is wickedly smart, but to their interest level in a way that they say, "Oh wow, this is fascinating. I want to know more." And that then can lead to so many different conversations, career tracks, involvements.
Well, I might question you on your comment on the public's intellect level, but that's for a different conversation. Anyway,
Well, bring it on, bring it
anyway,
on. I'm an optimist.
so okay, so you were saying.
Well, yeah, let's wrap up that portion of it. So I went into emergency response, did large scale chemical releases to the environment. Obviously, I wasn't the one causing them. Hopefully, I was just cleaning them up. And for about a decade, did environmental emergency response. It was fascinating. Did a lot of you know. Technology development during that time. How do you collect data from places that aren't connected? We did some drone development back in the day before they were ubiquitous, and this led to, of course, going to industries and being involved with what is the latest in satellite tech, really from a connectivity portion, and that led me to some conferences, some relationships that allowed me to get back into the space industry. So I joined back in 2015. I joined Spire Global. Really had an amazing time there. Joined as a fairly early employee. I moved to Glasgow, Scotland, and spent about 8.5 years at Spire. Wonderful journey, wonderful company, and that then led to where we are today with Exolaunch. Had an opportunity to move over to Exolaunch.
So we'll talk a little bit about your transition from CTO to CEO in the last few months, but maybe let's take a quick step back. Tell us a little about what is Exolaunch, and what are the products and services that you offer.
Yeah, of course. So Exolaunch, we are a launch services and deployment solutions provider. But what does that mean? Well, we're a satellite integrator that we collaborate with the launch providers and the satellite customers to bring the customers this reliable and flexible access to orbit. We have a series of products. We have CubeSat deployers. We have microsat separation systems. This includes our Carbonics line. That's a ring-based separation system from 8-inch up to 24-inch. The next generation of that, which I think we'll talk about later, is called NEO. We're really excited about how it will enable more customer payloads, a stiffer system that has some great performance qualities to it. We have Quadro, our 4-point separation system. And so what you're seeing here is we have a full product line from the smallest of CubeSats up to about 500 kilograms today. But with these new products, we're introducing up to about 1 metric ton starting next year. In addition to these separation systems, we have deployment sequencers, so we can provide some of the avionics that does the deployments. And we have ExoTube, which is a dispenser structure that lets the launch vehicles optimize the capacity and utilization of their vehicles, and of course brings customers a more kind of cost effective access to that vehicle. In addition to these hardware products, we also offer environmental test services, regulatory guidance to customers. So we want to be this turnkey solution provider to our launch customers.
So I want to talk a little bit about the company's kind of founding story uh, and sort of how that vision evolved. So maybe talk a little bit about that. You're also one of the few companies that, despite not raising any money, as far as I, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but as far as I understand, there has not been
That's
any
correct.
outside capital raise. The
That's right.
company
Yeah.
has cash flow positive, decent margins, and yeah, I want to talk a little bit about that. So tell me a little bit about the sort of the founding story and why and how you were able to build this business without the need for outside capital.
Yeah, of course. It's such an exciting story to tell, and it's such a rare story. So let me lay the groundwork of where we are today. Then we'll rewind on how we got there, because I think having that context of today's success makes the story even more impressive. So to date, we've launched 438 satellites. So we've had 30 different launch campaigns on six different launch vehicles on five continents. So I think that's important to paint this picture of, the kind of the breadth of experience that we have. Now, this is going to be maybe a controversial statement. Many of the launch providers, not all, of course, there are some huge players, but many of the launch providers we work with, our team has more launch experience than the launch vehicle team does. So that's something that we're able to bring to them. So today, you mentioned some of the, kind of the debt free, the investor free growth we've had this year. We're a roughly $100 million annual revenue company, and we're on this rapid growth trajectory. How did we get here? We're a spinoff from the TU Berlin, one of the most prestigious universities in Germany. And our founder, Dimitri Sternhardt, he was first a student and then taught at TU Berlin. And during his time there, he was building CubeSats. This is back in the 2010, 2011 time frame. And he said, I'm building these things. I cannot accept that you build this and then put it on the shelf. There has to be a way to get this in orbit. And rewinding to that time, there really were not many options. So we started looking around to say, how do you get these things to orbit? And there was not the pipeline that we have today in new space to do this. So we started developing relationships that would allow this. And at the time, the Soyuz vehicle was really the only vehicle that was accepting the risk. At the time, they saw it as a risk to provide rideshare opportunities on a commercial basis. So again, rewinding to this time frame, shuttle has been retired. Soyuz is the only access to the ISS. It's one of the few. It's really the only vehicle that's offering commercial access to capacity. So we started launching with Soyuz. He said, "Now, if I'm the one if I'm having this problem, there must be others that have this need as well." So that's why he founded the company, so he could start providing this commercial access to other CubeSat builders as well. So this then led to the hardware development of the CubeSat deployer. So this was in 2017. We launched the first Exopod, which is what we call our CubeSat deployer. Carbonics followed a couple of years later. This again the ring-based separation system in 2019. And so it really was this watching the market around and seeing how it's expanding and saying, well, there really is not an end-to-end solution provider that's connecting these two needs in the market. It's very interesting how much, launch providers are focused on capacity and what they can provide to, up mass to orbit. The satellite manufacturers, of course, they're all about the data and building the device that can collect that data from space, and they speak different languages. So the company really has provided this translation service between the two to help grow with the industry and to grow the industry itself.
So I do want to go back to the funding piece for just a second. So was this like completely bootstrapped from day one?
It sure was, yeah. So founder put in the money, and then every time he got a commercial deal, reinvested the profits from that. So yes, from day one, bootstrapped, no external funding, no debt. It's a very rare and pretty awesome story that we can tell about that.
That's impressive. Do you think you'll tap the capital markets, or do you intend to raise outside capital at some point?
I think so. it's one of those, we don't need it for survivability. One of the questions people ask is, what's your runway? Well, by its very nature, it's infinite because we are cash flow positive and just operating off of our own revenues and profits thereof. But we are having some conversations about investments. What we see is that the market, the new space market, continues to grow, and we really see a coalescing of capacity or coalescing of kind of needs and ideas around a certain size of satellite and capacity requirement of the industry that, to be honest, is coming very soon, coming in the next couple of years. And we want to make sure that we have the scale to meet that need when it's ready. What I mean by that is we see the biggest satellites getting a bit smaller, the smallest satellites getting a bit bigger, and coalescing around this, like, I'm going to call it this 300 to 700 kilogram range. So that's why we're developing the products that we are to support that range. We're also seeing tremendous numbers of constellation operators coming online. So from a scaling standpoint, we want to be able to meet them. To do that, we are looking for a little bit of scaling capital. So these are some of the conversations we're having. Again, it's kind of a fun and easy conversation because of the compelling story we have. But we're also, we're most interested in the right partner. Again, because we're not desperate for this. We want to make sure that it's a partner that enables our vision, and that comes alongside us, and not just that we need the cash to keep the doors open. It really is to enable scaling at a speed that we think matches the market.
So we glossed over this slightly, which is, I do want to know how a man from Arkansas ends up running a German launch services company. So give me a little bit more about that transition. I mean, now you're calling us you're calling us from Arkansas right now.
Today I'm in Arkansas. Yes, I
Yep.
split my time between Berlin and the U.S. So our headquarters is in Berlin, has been there since the founding, and most of our staff is there as well. So all of our engineering and our design and our manufacturing happens in Germany. We do have a U.S. office, so we have some people here as well, and I split my time.
Yeah,
and
I'd also maybe tie in also the cultural elements, right? Of like, sort of the sort of German American dichotomy, for lack of a better word, or like sort of that sort of that you're obviously spending time in the U.S. and then Germany. Yeah, so maybe talk a little bit about that as well.
Yeah, it's the whole industry is so international, and I'll use our amazing team as an example. So even though we are in Berlin, English is the language of the office because our staff is so international. Whether it's from France or the UK, of course from Germany, Argentina, the US, we have people from all over the globe, and I would say that mirrors really the new space industry. So when you talk about culture and what is this, of course there's a very strong German culture in the company, but there's also, I would say, and maybe an even stronger new space culture. This drive for speed, this drive to support the customers that we've grown. One of the things that attracted me to Exolaunch was this customer first focus, and that really has driven the company's trajectory as much as anything else. So it's not, I wouldn't, while we have the engineering discipline of German engineering and technical expertise, but we also have this new space ambition and this again just this drive and passion that I think serves well across borders, really.
I want to address the CEO transition. So obviously you transitioned into the CEO role in August. Maybe talk a little bit about why that was the case, why that was the right decision for the company.
Sure. So grateful for the opportunity. Yeah, as you mentioned, joined as the CTO originally. And this was, kind of a natural progression. I knew the team from before. We had worked together and really, appreciated the opportunity, the way that they welcomed me in. As I joined the company, as an executive team, we were discussing, what are the biggest needs for the company? How can I contribute to that? And one of the things that kind of naturally developed from those conversations was a focus on process and scaling. So it was about how do we develop our internal processes? How do we develop our teams? How do we make sure that we are ready to scale the company? And as we did this, that then over months, led to conversations about, well, what do roles look like? How do we all leverage our own skill sets for the best of the company? And again, very grateful that the executive team approached me and said, well, what if we shuffled things in this manner? So Dimitri is still very much involved, and I really appreciate his support and the way that he has enabled this transition where he still, of course, will always be the founder. He's currently serving as the president, so he is still very involved in the day-to-day, but it allows him to focus on some of the strategic initiatives, including things like our DLR deals, where I've been able to focus more on, again, these scaling processes and taking over a lot more of the public-facing uh, proselytizing of the company, talking about what we're doing and the exciting missions that we have, and doing things like this podcast or conference. I do a lot of speaking, a lot of representing the company. So it's been a very, I think, natural transition where we're playing to everyone's strengths, doing this very much as a team, but really, it's been a lot of fun, and I've really enjoyed the process.
So let's talk a little bit about the market for the service, and maybe just to take a step back, right? What does the market look like right now for rideshare missions, deployment systems, mission management? Obviously, must be good. 100 million top line, cash flow positive, business is doing pretty well. But tell me a little bit about what's sort of the state of that market right now.
Yeah, great question. As we look around, we see that the customers run the gamut. Of course, we still have tons of brand new startups that are doing their first, like, in orbit demonstrators. We have very established customers, new space customers that are already operating constellations of their fleet. We have legacy space operators that are starting to build smaller satellites and get into the traditionally new space arenas, prioritizing their operations in LEO. So what this means is you have a number of different kind of customer types and markets coming together, and we see those as all needing different things at different times. So a constellation operator, really at this point, they just kind of need the access to a launch vehicle and the hardware to effect the separation. You have the newest startup, which they need hand holding on everything from the regulatory side, the environmental testing side, the full range of how do you accomplish this thing of getting to orbit. And even when you have some people that have been building satellites for decades, they may need some help in what does speed mean on this? What do launch providers, especially in the rideshare market, what are their expectations for when you deliver the satellite, and what that speed of integration campaign looks like? So you have to look at each customer and where they are and what they need, and then of course enable the launch providers to be as efficient as possible. Because of course, if they're not launching, they're not making money. So how do you shorten these integration campaigns? How do you make sure that that they have the efficient access to the customer base? So it is just this continuous pipeline of running people through this.
So with SpaceX starting, having their own sort of in-house rideshare, smaller launchers, small launch providers starting to gain more traction. How are you differentiating your service? Like, what is sort of the, maybe that's just maybe that question. How are you differentiating your service?
Yeah, it's I love the question because it really gets back to like what value do we provide? And that value is, on the customer side, I think it's kind of easy for people to see or understand, even from the outside. They say, oh, yes, customer doesn't know how to do launch, so you provide that to them. Customer doesn't have access to the separation system, you provide that. But what value do we provide to the launch vehicles themselves? And it's a more subtle or maybe kind of behind the scenes value, but it's no less important. What we do for the launch providers is one, just on their revenue side, we provide access to customers. They often don't have the relationships with the entire kind of global community that we do. So we can bring customers, and of course customers bring revenue to them. So we can fill the rocket for them. But we also do a lot of the legwork for them. If you think about something like rideshare, there are a lot of players on this, on these missions. So we try to do a lot of the legwork for the launch providers, whether that's SpaceX or Rocket Lab or Ariane 6, whomever it is. We try to make it easy on them so that they have just this single point of contact and can come through us to say, hey, yeah, we now have X amount of capacity that we only have a single entity to deal with. So that's a value to them. And it really, again, is back to these translation services. Understanding both sides of this, we can help them communicate with each other in a way that has real consequences on timelines and, of course, just ease and efficiency of those operations.
So I have a couple maybe slightly controversial questions is what I'll say.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
So question one, is more launchers good for you or bad for you?
100% good for us. And good for the industry.
Sure. Do you believe that SpaceX is a monopoly currently?
I don't. Now, if we look at the stats, of course, the stats don't lie. Up mass by SpaceX, tremendous percentage comes through them. If you look at our own launch campaigns, we have launched a lot with SpaceX this year, and we love that and are grateful for that. We've also been on 2 Rocket Lab launches and, of course, the Ariane 6 launch this summer. So half of our launches this year have not been on SpaceX. Are they a monopoly? No, because there are other providers out there that are providing a service, in a commercially viable way. Are they the main player? Absolutely.
So maybe you've kind of answered my next question, which is if you believe that the transporter missions are anti-competitive to other launch companies.
I don't think they're anti-competitive. I get to say that, though, as a guy that gets to sell to both sides of that. One of the things that our customers continuously tell us they want is choice. And Transporter is an amazing program, and we're very proud to have been on every Transporter launch, and we hope to continue to be on every one of them. But our customers, they want variety, and I think variety is important to talk about what that means in terms of orbital access. There's a lot of up mass to LEO, today or this year, the last couple of years. But there's not a lot of orbital diversity in that access. And that really is what a lot of these other launch providers that aren't SpaceX are providing to the market, is diversity of orbit, diversity of where you can go and when you can get there. Of course, there's, arguments to be made about, sole source or not being dependent on single providers. But in general, the market needs a healthy ecosystem of launchers, of different types of mobility providers, if we say that, bringing in OTVs and other ways to get to orbit. And it takes all of those. I love to use the analogy of if you're standing on a busy street corner. So, let's go, we're in Berlin and we step out of the office and we're standing in Potsdamer Platz and we're looking around us and we see people walking. We see people on bikes. We see people in taxis. Somebody else is driving. We see people in cars. They are driving. We see buses. We see trains. We see airplanes overhead. All of these things are working together synchronously. Each of them has a purpose and a place in that infrastructure of transportation. And the same has to be true for us in space. Yes, we have SpaceX that's providing tremendous opportunities at cost-effective pricing for access to LEO. But we also must have the bicycles. We must have the taxis. We must have the trains. All of these pieces must work together to have a healthy ecosystem, both to and from orbit, and that's not just LEO. That's going to be MEO, GEO, and beyond. We have to have all those things. So is Transporter an amazing program? Absolutely. Is it the end result that we need? Not at all. We have to, sorry, I know I'm on my soapbox right now, but we have to support all of these different avenues for how to get to orbit, how to move around within orbit, and then how to come back as well. It's going to take all of them.
So I'm curious, over the next 5 to 10 years, what do you believe the trend looks like? That satellites are getting larger or smaller? And how are you guys positioning for whatever you think that future trend looks like?
Yeah, sure. So I revealed a little bit of this earlier, but I do think that we're seeing a trend that the biggest of satellites are I guess everything's driving to the mean. We see CubeSats getting larger, and then kind of those companies graduating into microsats and larger satellites. We see the largest, of course, we all know what the GEO market has looked like over the past decade. We see the largest of satellites getting smaller. We see, of course, distributed systems are the design du jour for how to do a capability. It's to have lots of smaller assets instead of single monolithic assets. All this brings us back to this, plus or minus a few hundred kilograms from 500. I really think that's where most of the market is moving towards. And that's why our product lines are focused on supporting that, 300 to 700 kilogram range. Because we see tremendous amounts of constellations coming online in that range.
How do you think that the larger launch vehicles that are coming online, the Starships, the New Glens, the Vulcans, how do you think that's going to affect your business model?
Yeah, so I think it's going to be again great for bulk capacity, and that is definitely needed. So something that we look forward to supporting. We want to be there right alongside all of those providers for this, tremendous, lots of capacity at one time to a single place. But the industry, we all have to then support how do you get it to other places where its final state needs to be. And some of that will be through small launchers that go direct to some other location. Some of it will be through in-orbit mobility. So we have a number of partners that we're talking to about providing that in-space mobility, because you can't, the cargo vessel that crosses the oceans, extremely efficient from point A to point B. But we have this entire system that then distributes those goods, throughout the rest of the ecosystem. I mean, it's not a stretch. That is the infrastructure we have to be striving for in orbit as well. So yeah, these heavy launchers, the Starships, the New Glens, they're extremely exciting, not just from a kind of a tech standpoint, but also from a industry enabling standpoint. But they are not the only solution. They are one large portion of it, but it will take all of the other supporting mechanisms around that. And those are non-trivial sizes of markets to fill in the rest of the ecosystem that's required.
You have a very unique insight into the launch market in that, you're kind of global player, you're talking to all the operators, you know sort of what supply demand looks like. So I'm kind of curious right now, and maybe into the future, do you believe the launch market is supply or demand constrained? I'm curious, what kind of feeling you have, and then how based on your answer, how has that affected sort of decisions internally at Exolaunch?
Yeah, I believe what we see on the market is that we're definitely launch capacity supply constrained. So not on the manufacturing, the satellite supply side, but on the launch capacity supply constraint now.
So in other words, people want to get on a launch vehicle, but they can't get on a vehicle on their own schedule, on their own time, delays, etc.
That's right. And again, it comes back to this capacity question of is the up mass available? You might could make the argument that the up mass availability is there, but is it the right availability for every customer? And I would argue that no, it's not. Again, we see a lot of customers saying, this is the mission I want to accomplish, what options do I have for that? And they are supply constrained on being able to accomplish their mission on the timeline that they want, because of options to orbit. Um, so again, this is an argument that leads us to support, all new entrants to the market for launch capacity, all new diversity of orbits. So more, the bandwagon program that SpaceX has rolled out is a great step in that direction. The in-orbit mobility, the OTV providers, what is the market asking for? I believe they are just asking for more choice to get to more places more often. So that's what we're modeling our not just our hardware products, but our services around.
So I'm curious, like, how do the European operators feel? And maybe you don't have, perhaps you don't have insight into this, but I'm curious, I shouldn't say European, the non-American operators feel about using American launch providers? Are they sort of like agnostic, like, hey, whatever, cheapest cost, best reliability, great? Or is there like a desire, like, hey, we need homegrown national launch?
Yeah, they're not agnostic at all to it. Of course, there are these commercial pressures where they say, like, if I want the cheapest appropriate, I mean, if we use that word, like the cheapest appropriate launch available to me. But there is definitely a desire around the world, not just in Europe, but it's very, the European market has been very vocal about this, desiring and needing this sovereign capability. So that is something that does go into their calculations. And whether that is institutional support, grants and monies for development programs, whether that's writing this into, the satellite manufacturer RFIs that say, first choice must be European provider, and if not available on this timeline, then you can go somewhere else. There's definitely a need and a desire for launch options, in your region, whether that region is Europe or Southeast Asia or wherever. Of course, we've seen a lot of nice press out of Australia recently with what they're doing with their space program. Japan and the Southeast Asian markets are just huge areas of investment these days. But of course, in Europe, we've seen the return with Ariane 6 of a sovereign launch capability. And we have a number of providers that have great vision and are executing on that vision. So they are working hard to make sure that there is a European solution with access to space.
So let's talk. Let's kind of jump back into sort of the specific Exolaunch systems. How has reliability been so far? Like since you guys have started, if a customer is asking for, what has reliability looked like?
Yeah, so reliability is a non-negotiable. It is something that our systems must work. They must do exactly what they're supposed to do, which means they have to hold a customer's satellite securely through the launch phase, but then they have to separate once that phase is over and the signal is provided to deploy. And so far we are very fortunate, and it's not through luck, it is through hard work and testing to have 100% success rate on that. So this is like table stakes. We have to provide reliable systems to our customers, and we spend a tremendous amount of energy and time and cost on testing to make sure that we provide that to customers. Above that, it's an interesting position that customers are in. Launch is the portion of their mission that they have the least control over, which means there's the most anxiety there. So, during the design and build process of their satellite, they are, they are involved. They are doing it. They are hands-on. They are setting those design requirements. Skipping forward during the operations phase, of course, they are the one that are operating the satellites. They understand them. They're commanding them. They're tasking them with what they need to do. But in between those 2 points, they give their satellite to us. And then we place it on a launch vehicle, and then it launches to space. And so they are handing over their baby to us for this portion of the mission that is critical. It's the thing that unlocks their, the revenue portion of their whole mission, and then entrust us to get it to space to get it there safely and reliably and without damage to then separate it on orbit where they can then start checking out their satellite. It's a tremendous responsibility that they place on us, but we take that very seriously to take care of their assets, their baby, as if it were our own.
I want to talk a little bit about agility. So, are there innovations or product adjustments that have occurred internally as a result of customer feedback? Obviously, you guys have had customers from all over the world, all sorts of different sizes of satellites. Any type of feedback that has driven a design decision or a hardware sort of general hardware decision for the company?
Yeah, absolutely. Listening to customers is key to what we do. A couple of examples of this are, I'll give you two different ones of two different product lines, but our Exopod Nova deployer, this came out of a conversation when a customer said, "Hey, we love your deployer. We're inside the CubeSat spec, but we would like to start bending the boundaries of this. If we were to hold the rail dimensions the same of a CubeSat, could we get more elbow room? Could we get more volume outside the rails just to put more things on there, more deployables, more solar panels, more antennas, whatever it may be? Can we get more room than the CubeSat standard specifies so that we can unshackle our engineers from having to make things so small, so skinny, and we're just not able to do things because we don't have this headroom, this volume outside the rails?" So Exolaunch took that on and developed a new deployer that, again, is our Exopod Nova. It has now become this industry standard of, again, unshackling the engineers so that they can make better performance decisions and not have to squeeze things into such a small package. And we now allow up to 40 millimeters on the different faces of a CubeSat. And this was, again, 100% driven by a customer request and saying, like, if you could build such a thing, these are the volumes we could provide and what it would do for our business. So Exolaunch developed that. Been a great partnership and great success. And now it's kind of our standard CubeSat deployer. On the other side, Neo, Carbonics Neo, our next generation of ring-based separation system, is again driven by industry demand, customers, and launch vehicles. So it's designed for the SpaceX loads. As the rideshare program has developed, the environmental loads that you must survive have kind of coalesced, changed over time, and now we have these very clear requirements for what the customer satellite must be tested to. And so we've designed Neo to support larger satellites as a stiffer system that are designed to the SpaceX loads. So it allows the customer to say, okay, if I can design it to the volumes and mass constraints of the SpaceX RPUG, I know this separation system will support me. And this is a huge deal because before, customers have had to say, like, which size do I need and is it appropriate for this mass and CG? But we're trying to just make it a lot simpler for customers so they just have this confidence that, yes, I know that I can just pick this up and it's going to work for my satellite and it's going to work on this launch vehicle. So these are very industry and customer driven innovations that the Exolaunch has provided.
Are there any missions or launches that stand out where Exolaunch was sort of pushed to the limit? It was a request, it was an ask that really sort of pushed the boundaries of what you guys offer.
Yeah, I love the flexibility we provide customers, where they of course have their programs and they're aiming for this launch date, but because of our capacity, we're able to allow them some flexibility. If they're not going to make deadlines, we can let them rebook on different vehicles or different missions within the same family. And this I think is a differentiator for Exolaunch, but also just the scale that we do things. Again, like back to some of the transporter missions, some of the other rideshare missions, the number of customers we have on these missions and the speed with which we execute the launch campaign really is it's kind of mind-boggling to somebody that's not involved in this in the day-to-day. we will go to the launch campaign and in a series of 15 days, we can do 40 plus, 50 plus integrations of customer satellites onto the launch vehicle. And if you think back again, going back to maybe 10 years ago, where each satellite might take multiple days, we now give our customers, of course, depending on their situation, but a lot of our customers, we don't give them a count of days that they have at the launch site. We give them a count of hours that they have, and of course, we work with them through those operations to make sure that they can meet that, so that we are very efficient with these operations on site. I think that this is one thing that I'm really proud of, is how efficiently we can process payloads, again, to support the customers, but also the launch vehicles, so that they have efficient operations at their launch site.
How many? By the way, how many people are at the company today?
Yeah, we're roughly 60 people, so we're a small but efficient team.
Yeah, that's great. And what is sort of the plans for the U.S. expansion?
So we're hiring actively. Of course, hit our website, see our open positions. The U.S. for the first couple of years, the U.S. office was focused mainly on sales, business development, but now we have technical people in the U.S. as well. So it is about expanding for the mission management side of things. Facilities, so that we can do customer integrations. Today, we lease facilities in the U.S. as needed, but how do we have dedicated facilities to support U.S. integrations, as well as the mission managers, the technical team and the sales team, to support both commercial and government operations in the U.S.
And sort of medium, let's just call it medium term. Where do you see the most significant growth area for the business? Is there a particular area, particular customer base where you really are spending time on and focusing?
Yeah, again, back to the kind of APAC region, we see tremendous growth in Southeast Asia. We have a number of amazing customers there, both on the launch vehicle side, but also on the satellite side. That is an area where you will see us focus our efforts, our resources in the coming months and years, in Japan and elsewhere in the region. So that is an area that I think we'll see great expansion of the industry. Of course, globally, we're seeing the Middle East has a lot of interest in investment in space. We talked about Australia earlier as well. And so I think that there are these hot spots that you will find us as we support where investment and where growth in the industry is.
And long-term vision. So like call it, 10 plus years. Like what does Exolaunch look like as a business? What are you doing then that you're not doing now? What does that look like?
Yeah, it really is to be the conduit to space for our customers. It is, and how do we do that? It's by supporting people that are already doing things with excellence. Our ExoTube product, I think, is a great example of that. We're really excited. We've recently announced this program and have our first order for it. It's a dispenser structure that allows you to maximize the capacity used in a launch vehicle. As we do these analyses, we find that the launch vehicles, especially for the small and medium launch, are often volume constrained, not mass constrained, with how they can configure payloads inside the fairing. And so we've intentionally developed this product to maximize that utilization, because that supports the launch vehicles in maximizing their revenue, and of course brings more customer opportunities to those launch vehicles.
Yeah, it's a great point, because if you actually look at any of the photos of the transporter missions, the fairing, there's a lot of unused volume that you can tell, because you have a payload adapter with a small satellite, maybe can fit a much bigger satellite, and there's certainly optimizations that can be made there. So I totally get that. Well, Robert, okay, this has been great, but I want to talk. I want to kind of end this conversation with a little bit more about you. So, like, outside of based on sort of your career trajectory, you've had a lot of different things you've been interested in. At least early days is what I should say. What do you do? What do you do when you're not leading and running Exolaunch?
Well, it's an awkward question. I don't, I don't often talk about myself. I'm a runner. I have an amazing family, wife and two kids, who are great. My kids are in high school. I'm super proud of them. The joke is I say, well, I've got two amazing kids, which leaves the door open to say, well, how many not amazing kids do you have? Two wonderful kids and an extremely supportive wife. Um, so yeah, I mean, I love to run. I love woodworking.
Woodworking.
But, yeah.
Okay. So tell me what is that like?
It's a very zen activity.
You're talking to a city guy, by the way. So this is new territory for me.
Well, oh boy, how deep do we go? Okay, I'm gonna show you. I know on the podcast listeners they can't see what we're seeing on the screen, but this is my wedding ring, and this is a piece of walnut that is from a tree on the property where I grew up. Again, up in North Arkansas, that we had to fell during at one point. So we dried the wood. We had it milled. And then, I turned this little piece of it into a wedding band on a lathe. Turning wood on a lathe is a very zen activity because you have to focus on the product, on the wood, and what it's telling you. And I have a whole actually video series on an analogy of woodworking as a how to get the most out of our employees through woodworking.
Is this on YouTube?
Not publicly, no.
Okay,
it is, but one of the reason I bring that up is because when you are turning wood, there becomes a time when you are no longer in charge, and the wood is in charge because it's telling you what it can and can't do. So your job is to uncover, whatever you're building, whatever you're making, whether it's a vase or a honey scoop or whatever, whatever you are turning, you're trying to uncover that because it already exists inside the wood. So you're just trying to reveal it. And the same is true of our employees. I love developing employees because their capacity is already inside them. And our job as leaders is to provide them with an environment and the support to reveal that, so they can be, what they are destined to become. So yeah, woodworking speaks to me from this. It's a very relaxing activity, but also it's a very you are working with the material and you have to let it guide you at some point.
Yeah. No, fascinating. Okay, so my last question is centered around Little Rock. So
yes,
I've actually been to Little Rock, but I actually was driving through. It was a road trip from New York down to Dallas, and we drove through Little Rock. We spent like a few hours there, but unfortunately not much more time than that. But for the listeners who end up in Little Rock for whatever reason, work or pleasure, or family or whatever it is, do you have any recommendations of places to go eat? I'm asking.
Oh, so now you want to get controversial. Is that how this goes? Well, so you're going to have to hit up some of the local barbecue joints. And this is where things are going to get really hairy. But yeah, there's some great barbecue joints around. Little Rock is a really great city. It's a very friendly city. And I will say this, even though, as a country, we are divided politically, but we have the Clinton Presidential Museum here. And regardless of your politics, please hear me say this, regardless of your politics, a presidential museum is a really neat place to visit, regardless of your feelings of that president. So that's a really neat thing we have in town here. But yeah, I think if we're talking, and there's so we sit on the river. So Mo, I'm here, and there's nothing special about my house. Of course, I love it, but I don't say this because it's a special house or location, but because Little Rock affords these opportunities. I can be on a canoe in the river, the Little Maumelle, in 3 minutes. It's just, it's so accessible to anything you want to do as an outdoorsman. So we've got a great trail system around here. Mountain biking is huge around here. But yeah, if you're going to come to town, call me up and we'll go have some barbecue.
I love that. I will take you up on that offer. So, Robert, thanks so much for being on the show. Pleasure chatting. Great to hear your kind of market views, and just appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, thank you, Mo. Really enjoyed it. It's been great.
Okay.